Hi, well, welcome back. And today we're going to be painting orchids. So I have a handout for you that I hope will be helpful. Two images. As a matter of fact, on October the 10th, the orchid show opened at Selby Gardens. So I was there and photographed quite a few. These are two of my photographs from the day there. And I also sketched. One of the things I would really encourage you to do is to, if you get a chance to go to Selby, go in and sketch from life. This is in my little watercolor notebook. So this was actually in the house where they had the photograph exhibit. They had a orchid in a pot, and we have some orchids in our backyard that aren't blooming right this minute, but the reference I used is the wonderful gardens we have here in Sarasota. This is on the watercolor paper, and the photo I made of this wasn't quite as good, but I think I could paint this because it's like using the white flower, and I indicated shadows. I could paint directly right here for my orchid painting. They have in the mansion, I guess you might call it, an exhibit of botanical orchids. And I'm approaching this painting today because I was inspired by those botanical paintings to be pretty accurate and leave the white background. So that's how I'm going to do the demo today. So here we go. I have a couple of sketches right now. Let's see, I think you can see both of my sketches here as well as my palette. If I start with this one, there is a lot of white paper. This particular one is this flower, and it has the white, but it also has that really hot pink. I believe I talked to you a little about using magenta, and that's where, now since I've already drawn this, maybe what I need to do first before we do our painting today, maybe what I'll do is give you a quick little suggestion about drawing, okay? Um, I, I have so many photographs of orchids, it's not funny. These are all pretty exotic orchids, and since I don't know the names of all these, they're like roses. They just are amazing, exotic. This one would actually be a fun one to do, I think. I kind of like the way the photograph works. And sometimes your photograph is good enough to go by and you just say, that's what I want to paint. Maybe you have your own reference. Maybe you will go to Selby Gardens and sketch. Maybe you will use the reference that I have. So maybe this one looks pretty easy, but it's not quite as interesting as maybe this one or this one. I think this one is the one I'll sketch for you right now. So with that said, I just use my #2 pencil. I figure out if my design is horizontal, which I'm going to go this one horizontal, or a vertical, which I've sketched already. And I begin with the flower focal point. So that would be the center, and it wouldn't be in the middle of my composition. Remember that you can zoom in on anything that you want to see more clearly. Oh, you know why I'm probably not going to do this one? Oh, I should have thought a little bit more about that. This is going to take about 20 years. No, I'm exaggerating. There is a wash that I would have to put underneath this one in a pale green. And when that dried, I would have to do all this little detailed vein work. But you know what? It would be worth it. It just really would. So this orchid, oh my goodness, is absolutely beautiful. It's seen from the side, so it does have that foreshortening of the petals. And I'm not going to draw this. Looks like little miniature trees. These veins are quite exotic. As a drawing, this would even be fun to do. And then I have to look at, as you make these lines, you have to sort of suggest the curve of the petal. So the main stem that I saw here and I saw here help to give And then here, these lines help to shape what the petal is doing, curving either this way or that way. And then of course the overlap, this one is underneath, and you draw what you see, just simply that. All right, this has some very pale plants that are other flowering orchids for the plant are coming back here. This could be because of a flash on the camera, but I'm thinking that it's the bottom side of the leaf that makes it so pale, that probably the front side is the patterned side. Okay, so this plant is going off, and then I have, so this is going to be the focal point of the area, but the plant continues. And as you grow your pieces, as you sketch each of the shapes that you see, try to include the whole piece of paper so that you are bumping off the sides, filling your space in an interesting way. And we're always referencing the positive and negative. The positive, of course, is the subject, and the negative is the space around it. And it's really true if you go into the mansion at Selby and see those beautiful, some of those botanical gardens go back to the 1800s. And there is a woman who does these beautiful botanical pieces in watercolor that I believe they were done just a few years ago. And they're quite beautiful. All right, so this is definitely the bottom of the plant, the flower, because now I see this inside scoop right here, and then this is the back side, which is more plain. In this flower, we have that, well, I don't think that's in the right place. Actually, it is in the right place, but it does get concealed behind that petal. And then there is a continuation of a stem and a smaller bud, these beautiful little buds that have multiple lines. And here is another little bud. And I didn't put that second petal in for that one. Okay, so my space has a little too much negative space right in here, to be honest. And maybe well, I might exaggerate this little shape a little more. I think it is that big. And I think I like that design. Okay, that's not too bad. All right, so I'm not really going to paint this one. I think I'm going to work with a couple of these other sketches that I've already made, because you have the reference to both of these designs. So if I work right here, I believe you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm just going to start with a little round brush. And I mentioned before using for magenta, this is that opera color. I don't know if you can see this opera right here. It's a really bright pink. This is that Janet Violet Rose. And if I show you, I've still got a little green sitting there. It's a different color. It's more of a magenta. There is that, which I think you're going to have one of these two colors. You could, if you have rose madder or alizarin. You see, these reds are all quite different. Let's do this. I need to show you on a piece of paper what these colors look like. So pardon me while I just take the back side of this piece of paper and show you the colors that I'm referring to. All right, so here is the rose madder. Now the rose madder is a nice pink. The here is my alizarin crimson. Okay, here is alizarin crimson. It's more of it looks too red. It's not pink enough. What could you add to that? Well, I'm trying to show you basic colors, so let me not add anything because I don't think the alizarin is a choice. All right, here is my fuchsia, which I've been calling my fuchsia. Oh, it's a little thick. I really need to water that down. But there we go. There is a beautiful color that will work with these particular orchids. Here is, and that's American Journey color, by the way. This is my um, Janet Violet Rose, and it has a little more blue to it. And then here's Opera. So hopefully in your toolbox, you have your paints, rather, that you've got something that's going to give you a pink or purple, a magenta that you might need for these particular orchids. If not, what you can keep in mind is that the orchids come in yellows and whites and other colors. So you'll be very frustrated if you can't come up with some of these colors if you're doing this particular one. Okay, so when I start, I can use a combination of, or I can, I'm basically using that Janet Violet. I want to show the stemming that's going on, but I also need to keep the white that's happening in the flower petals themselves. It's not that solid. There's a lot of streaking. So to avoid having any of the white being lost, I'm going to leave the white where I see them in my reference and just begin to add the water and my color. And where I want some detailed lines, I have to let that be dry. But right now I want to sort of streak that and let it run together. I'm going to lift just a little right there. Okay. And just keep going with this pink, now magenta. This is very solid right here. Very solid. There's a change in color here. It's these subtle things. The trick, I think, of painting any flower is to not paint the whole flower as a solid piece, but petal to petal, so that you allow these petals to dry next to each other and you will have the feeling of distinct shapes. So to me, I almost could have used a bit of opera right there. That's a bright color. I actually picked up some of my opera because I have it. Why wouldn't I use it? And really did pop that. There's going to be some shadows in here. So, and there's shadows here. Well, I wasn't going to do that, but now I am. To work with shadows, I will be putting a little bit of blue into my either rose madder or whatever magenta I'm using. It needs that to darken it, to darken where the shadow goes. And then I'm just going to lightly add a little water to that. I can, while I'm at it, without touching, you have to leave a little edge here, that shadow for this petal because it's behind. And I think I can go ahead and put the little bit of shadow here. And then I'm going to use just plain water on this brush to soften that edge and extend that shadow out from its little hiding place. What's going on there? Now, do I have a shadow anywhere else? No, that kind of took care of that particular flower. Okay, so I'll hold it up and let you see it a little bit better. So I'm getting started with the flower, and I think these orchids will go pretty quickly, especially if you're leaving the white. I think I could have cleaned my background up a little bit better. I don't want to confuse the area. I just want to really make these pop and be beautiful. So let's go with another petal, and I'm just painting this edge where it seems to be the darkest. And I got a little heavy with that particular color, so I picked up some of the opera. Yeah, I have too many pencil lines on my paper. I hope I can come back and clean that up, but certainly not while I'm painting. And I have to let that dry, be patient. I'm dragging the water through that color And it might happen on the first time, but it may take a couple of swipes to really get the detail that you want. You want to leave a lot of the paper on this particular one. And let's put some pink in here, or magenta. And that shadow should have come around. I can also intensify that and make it a little darker. And remember, it's your brush strokes that suggest the way the petal is working. Now that's a little linear, and I'm going to soften it up. And I have the pink coming through here. And I just will go with what I see. And now I want to finish the inside, but I will let that one dry and work on something else for a few minutes and come back to it and add more detail. Okay, this has the radiating line. So I always try to use my brush stroke in the direction that I see that activity. This is very dark, and I even left pencil shadows so I would remember to make that quite dark. There's a little brown piece here and here, and this is much darker where that shadow is. And I'm going to soften with a little water on my brush. Bring that out. It could be darker, but, and I want this to be soft there. Okay. And, you know, I think there's, I'm wondering about that shape I drew there. It's really more pink, more magenta. It's not so much a separate piece. It looks like there's that little brown piece in here. This is radiating out a bit. And you remember when we did, those of you who worked with us in the summer, we did some pansies. Pansies had similar little strokes to be seen. Now, and that was because the center of the flower had that little radiating effect. Okay, I'm going to put more blue into the shadow of some of these places that seem to be needing some more darks. And where sometimes I simply put the color and then I soften it with the water. So I'm kind of working back and forth between my two brushes. There, I kind of like that. And this is all seems to need to be a little darker. And I'm already working with it. It seems to be drying pretty quickly. This is more shadows that I'm putting in right now. So let me spend about 10 more minutes showing you. Okay, let's see. I hope this is a little bit easier to see. And every now and then I'll try to pop that up for you so you can see it a little bit better. Okay. Let's switch to the other other reference, and then I'll come back and add some more detail here. Okay, so that's drying for a minute. And let's see, this is the one I want to look at for a minute. And my reference for that is here. Let me fold this because all you're seeing is my sketch anyway. So I'm going to look at this reference, and I'm going to, this is more of a solid shape, and I'm just going to paint one flower, and then I'm going to come back to the other one. I'll finish these up and show you the finished product, but I think you're going to get the hang of what we're doing today. We're painting, we're sketching to create positive and negative spaces, but because the negative spaces are the areas around, and here's the photograph of the photo, the photo of the sketch, sorry, that came kind of gray blue. I don't know why I did that on a white piece of paper. Here I'm going to just be painting this bright color. Now, could I, if this was a yellow orchid, I would be painting yellow. If it's a different type of orchid that had other colors, I would be dealing with the colors that I see in the photograph. I don't know why it just happened that I picked these two, and they are this magenta, beautiful magenta color. Within what I'm doing right now, I have the dark magenta in with that wet look, and I can see here that I need to blend that. Looks like I left out something on the drawing right there. Looks like, no, I just have to paint, I just have to put the water right to that edge. Okay, there. It's good to have a reference. I can't do anything from memory. Wow, just what I'm doing with a brush helps to indicate, let's see if I can show you what I just did here. The, not very well, yes. Okay, so what I just did is I added some water and I used my brush strokes to indicate the petal veins. And so it's very, very subtle. So if it, and this is again, is that solid petal that I'm looking at right here, okay? So I just continue with that. Sometimes I skip a petal so that I'm not running them together, because literally watercolor will run together. Just be careful with your edges and try to let your brush stroke move in the direction of the petal. So that's what I'm trying to emphasize. So again, I'm going to take this darker color into this lighter wet color and do the blending while it's kind of blending wet and wet. And where I see it dark, I'm going to make it dark. And where I see it light, I'm going to kind of try to blend it and keep that light. Again, this stroking is taking care of that for me. Wow, I really like the way that worked. And now I made a dark spot that's not there, so I can just add the water and soften it up. I'm filling in this little space here where the flower is behind the stem. It's important to draw. It is very important to observe what you see and not oversimplify, but to have a reference. You know, that's why it was so nice to go to the gardens yesterday, or whenever it was I went, and see and sketch on location. And even if you're careful and not standing in somebody's way to pass by you, you can be kind of surreptitious about it, and no one would mind your sketching there. And sketching on your watercolor paper and taking your own photo reference allows you to be to choose what you want to do and the composition you want. I find it's very hard to take a photograph of the orchids when I was there, because there's so much going on in the background. And yes, we could make the design more complicated. We could include some of that background, but the truth is, I wanted just to focus on the flower, which we've done before. All right, I captured that dark. Now I see this dark, and there is a little bloom, not a bloom, but a baby bulb, whatever you want to call that, that's showing up right here. And the only way I'm going to get contrast is by keeping that light edge. So right now I am painting part of the flower. It's pretty dark, pretty solid, and I do feel like I have to stick a little bit of blue into my red, my magenta, to get that contrast, because it's quite a contrast here. Okay, and I may have gotten that a bit dark. To be honest, it's very dark on this side too. I'm using my cobalt, and I just use a little bit of my ultramarine. I'm going to get as dark as I dared with this shadow side on this little seed pod or baby bulb. I'm not sure what to call it. Okay, now as I move here, I see a line, and I'm wondering if I should go ahead and put the shadow, since it's on my brush, right here and right here. There's a few places that I saw some darker lines. And then go back to a lighter magenta. Let that blend in. I had to take my paper towel and clean off my brush. It was a little too much. And this should be staying almost white. So I have to lift and keep that light. I also lifted in a place where I wasn't really needing to lift, but since I did, I'm going to go ahead and leave that light and decide if I need to go back and make it darker. Okay, I have the shape contained, and I just have to finish this petal here. All right. It's hard to stop when you're having fun, and by showing you the flower petals, there is also stems and sometimes green leaves. So the green leaves are like any of our other paintings that we've done before. The variety of green is just observing. We don't want them to be too bright. The stems vary here, so this is a good one for me to show you. I made this much too harsh right here. There is white, but I have taken my brush and blended into that, and that worked pretty good. I do need to continue making a few more strokes here. What I want to do is the stems that are going on in this one, and then go back to my other flower painting to show you. I see a light green and a dark green, and I see an orange. So that are going on in the stems, maybe that's not quite that bright of an orange. I also sense that there's a bit of pink that's coming in to that. Maybe it's reflected from the flower. But while that's wet, it's nice to do whatever blending you're going to have. This is definitely a yellow green. So I use one of my yellows that, see here, it goes right there. And it turns into the darker green. So I always use that wonderful Viridian green, and because I'm working with this magenta, I will definitely take the magenta into the green to make my dark. And just carefully, you almost want to draw your stems a little narrow just in case you go out of your line a bit. So you don't want that stem to get too heavy. Now, what happened just there is the blending of the yellow into that green was very nice. So it comes around here. It continues as this dark, and the stem is getting a little thicker. I hope I didn't get too thick just now. It turned blue, and I added a little more green. And right here, I want the blending to happen between this orange, magenta, and the stem. So it's really kind of a pretty color. It's dark, very dark right through here. Now, I wasn't gonna finish that stem all the way down. So my rule of thumb is when I'm not ready to finish something all the way down, is that I want to stop the paint by just putting water there. And I'll come back to that because I want it also to blend, and it just keeps going. So I just add the water and let it stop. So what I have here is the beginning of that one painting, which will have multiple flower blossoms joined together by a stem that intersects the page. Here, I'm going to go back to my original work. And, this one is tempting to try some of that dark background, but I'm going to stick with my plan. But I'll tell you, to be honest with you, I know you'd forgive me if I go back and draw these other little white things and paint all that dark. I would not put the sign in, but you can see how that dark is really kind of an interesting design. All right, stop myself. I will finish this little flower and talk to you about the stem on this one. This one has a pale green stem. So the flower now, I'm going to use just a touch of yellow for this little center. It's just the palest color. I pick up a little touch of the orange for these little, I had too much paint, and so I lifted, blotted, and I don't know why these little touches of orange are there, but they seem to be part of that area, and they that just looks good. I'm glad I saw that little bit of orange. Am I going to have any orange here? No, it looks like there's only yellow in this particular center. I don't see any orange in this one at all. So those little touches of color will be kind of nice. Since the stems are so pale, I probably would run water and then come in with my greens. And I touched the green with that dark green, but then I went back and picked up a little yellow. It may require a little pink in there to dull it. And I see a shadow on one side. So this runs into the white. This one keeps going. When this dries, I definitely would make a shadow. And what I mean by shadow is that I would just come along the bottom side and darken that line just on the bottom side, like this, with the tip of the brush. Okay, I said that I might need to do a little more strokes through the center of this. Remember that first sketch I made where I said you would have to draw those veins. Depends on which orchid you're doing, but this is the approach that you would take. It's just drawing on top with the tip of your brush. And the botanical plant paintings that were there of the orchids were done with such beauty and such love and such detail that it's quite inspirational to see that someone would take the time to really observe all that little pattern play that comes with these lovely flowers. But this does make a big difference in this painting to show those lines. And they're done after everything is dry. You know, I wonder if you could do a dry brush. To me, it's just the simplest way is just to paint those little strokes, just to put them in. But don't lose your whites. It's very important. I already realized I had more white here on the tip and that I don't have that anymore. So do be careful. Keep your whites. Don't lose your whites. And this is coming to a conclusion for the flower. And so voila, I will finish these up, but I think that's all you need to know for now is how to sketch, compose your positive and negative spaces, use the 2 references that I sent you, make your own designs, go to the gardens, be inspired, and enjoy orchid painting.